The gravel crunched under the tires of my F-150 as I turned onto Patriot Ridge Drive for the first time in 20 years. The place had changed, but not in the way you'd hope. The rolling farmland I remembered from boyhood was now buried under rows of pastel homes, manicured to the point of sterility, flags, flower beds, and silence like a model town designed by control freaks. Welcome back to Virginia. I pulled into my driveway, exhaling slowly. My land sat at the edge of the boundary, 5 wooded acres inherited from my late father. It was the last plot with character. The last plot that wasn't suffocated by a homeowners association. The old farmhouse stood tall, restored but not tamed. I'd spent months coordinating renovations while still stationed in Coronado. Retirement came fast. One day I was commanding a SEAL team off the Horn of Africa. The next, I was buying lumber and relearning the rhythm of civilian life. Tag barked from the porch, tail wagging like a propeller. He was a Belgian Malinois trained for combat but raised for loyalty. He'd been with me in Afghanistan and Iraq. Now he was just as ready for a peaceful life as I was, but peace was already slipping through my fingers. A man in a polo shirt and khaki stood beside my mailbox, arms folded tight. He was in his 50s, face flushed from the July sun or perhaps from indignation. I knew the type, bureaucrat, enforcer, probably spent more time drafting rules than living by them. "You're Commander Grant, right?" he called as I stepped out of the truck, retired. "But yeah, I'm Barry Klein, president of the Patriot Ridge Homeowners Association." He gestured at the street like it was his personal empire. "We weren't informed of your arrival. I don't need permission to come home." He stiffened at that, then forced a smile. "We're a tightly managed community. We have expectations, architectural standards, landscaping compliance, vehicle limitations." I glanced at the HOA sign posted at the end of the street. No commercial vehicles, no military equipment, no visible solar panels. "You must love writing citations," I said. Barry's eyes narrowed. "We simply enforce the rules the community voted for." "I'm not part of your community," I replied calmly. "This land's been in my family since the 1800s. It was zoned rural long before Patriot Ridge was a blueprint on someone's desk." He smirked, a man who thought he held the high ground. "Technically, your property borders the HOA jurisdiction. That means certain shared guidelines apply: noise ordinances, visual impact, approved color palettes." I stopped listening. I'd been under real fire. I didn't have time for suburban pettiness wrapped in legalese. Barry handed me a packet. "This outlines the neighborhood's expectations. You'll find the fines escalate quickly." I took it but didn't read it. "You've had your introduction. You can leave now." He lingered just a beat too long, trying to assert dominance. Then he walked off, heels clicking on my gravel like punctuation marks in a threat. 2 hours later, a notice of violation was pinned to my fence. The offense: improper parking of a non-standard vehicle. My truck tactical tires, antenna, blackout finish was apparently too aggressive for Patriot Ridge. Over the next week, more notices followed. One for tag barking, one for my solar backup generator, another for the pull-up bar I'd installed on an oak tree out back. Each violation seemed pettier than the last. I ignored them, until the day I came home from the hardware store and found my gate padlock cut clean through. 3 men in matching HOA polos stood in my driveway. Barry was with them, clipboard in hand, chin lifted like a man delivering a sermon. "You're in breach of 6 ordinances," he said. "We've given you ample warning. We're here to assess your structures and initiate enforcement procedures." "You broke into my property," I said quietly, fists clenched. "This is a community intervention," Barry snapped. "You're not above the rules just because you wore a uniform." One of the men behind him, stocky, red-faced, adjusted something beneath his jacket. The glint of metal flashed for a moment. That's when I knew this wasn't about property lines or color palettes. This was about power, and they'd just stepped into the wrong man's war zone. The moment I saw that glint of metal beneath the stocky man's jacket, my instincts kicked in. 20 years in hostile zones teaches you to read danger before it announces itself. "Hands where I can see them," I said coldly, locking eyes. With him, the man flinched, hesitated, then casually rested his hand on his belt. Not quite drawing, not quite backing down. It was the kind of half move made by someone who thought wearing a weapon made him powerful. Barry, still smug with clipboard in hand, scoffed. "Oh, come on, Commander. Don't tell me you're scared of our neighborhood patrol." "I'm not scared," I replied, voice flat. "But I recognize recklessness when I see it. You're trespassing, armed, and provoking a man on his own land." "We're not trespassing," Barry said sharply. "Per Section 12 of the Patriot Ridge Code, we're permitted to enter adjacent properties to enforce compliance measures. That includes inspections of non-permitted structures and external modifications." He actually quoted a clause while standing behind an armed goon. "You brought a gun to an HOA inspection," I said slowly, my tone now like ice. "Did you stop to think that was a bad idea?" The stocky man, Mitch, according to his monogrammed name tag, finally spoke. "It's legal concealed carry. And you're the one acting aggressive." Tag barked sharply from the porch, responding to the tension. His body stiffened, ears pinned back. One step from me would have unleashed him. I raised a hand and gave a low whistle. Tag stilled, trained as ever. "Let me be clear," I said. "You came through a locked gate, with no legal warrant, and your man here brought a weapon onto my property. That's not enforcement. That's provocation." Barry turned red. "You think being some washed-up soldier gives you immunity? You're surrounded by civilians. Now we make the rules." Wrong words. Very wrong words. I stepped forward slowly, deliberately. Mitch tensed, hand now hovering just over his hip. "Touch that weapon," I said, low and sharp, "and I promise you won't have time to regret it." He blinked, finally realizing the balance of power wasn't what he thought. The gun wasn't protection, it was liability, and I wasn't afraid. I'd disarmed men twice his size in pitch-black combat zones with one hand bleeding and the other broken. Mitch backed off. Barry's bluster faded fast. "Look, we were not here to escalate. We just need access to verify violations and issue citations. That's all. Get off my land," I said. "We'll report this." He snapped. "Good. I'll do the same." They left, this time not in arrogant strides but in silent retreat. Mitch avoided eye contact, his hand no longer twitching near his hip. Barry muttered something under his breath, but I wasn't listening anymore. I waited until they disappeared, past the tree line, then walked to the front of my property and checked the gate. The padlock was cleanly cut, bolt cutters, most likely. I picked up the remains, turning the cold metal in my hands. They'd crossed a line. Back in the house, I poured black coffee into a chipped mug and opened a drawer. Inside lay a USB stick, ordinary looking but holding the drone footage I'd captured earlier that week. Ever since the first notice showed up, I'd mounted a silent sentinel above my roofline. Footage showed them entering, breaking the lock, stepping onto the porch. It captured Mitch adjusting the grip on his waistband. The whole thing was time-stamped and clear. I called the sheriff. "Deputy Holt," answered local. Younger guy. Fresh badge. They were armed. He asked, surprised. "You got proof?" "I do." He promised to send someone by the next morning. I ended the call and leaned back in my chair. Outside, the sun dipped below the ridge, bathing the treetops in gold. The stillness of my land was a comfort, but I knew it wouldn't last. This wasn't over. I'd hoped to live quietly, raise Tag, build a greenhouse, maybe teach self-defense to local vets. But men like Barry didn't allow peace. They mistook kindness for weakness. They thought a decorated commander was just another resident with a mailbox and a mortgage. They had no idea who they were dealing with, and by the time they realized, it would be far too late. By morning, I wasn't just a retired SEAL. I was a man preparing for war, just not the kind fought with rifles and night vision. Deputy Holt arrived right on time. Young, polite, but his eyes widened when I played the drone footage. He watched Barry and his two cronies cut my lock, stroll in like landlords, and watched Mitch reach under his jacket. "You weren't exaggerating," Holt muttered, rubbing his jaw. "He's lucky you didn't react like a SEAL." "I did," I said. "Just not in the way he expected." "I'll file a full report," Holt added. "You've got enough here to press criminal trespassing and brandishing charges." "I'm not just pressing charges," I replied. "I'm burning the whole rotten system down legally." Holt raised a brow. "You're going after the HOA. I'm going after everything it stands for." I started with the county clerk's office. Patriot Ridge's HOA charter was built on shaky ground, founded during a time of rapid development, rammed through with signatures from absentee lot owners and rubber-stamped by a corrupt zoning board. A few of those board members had since retired, or been quietly removed for ethics violations. I gathered every document, building codes, bylaws, the original charter. I marked every amendment, every vote that lacked quorum, every policy that extended power beyond its legal reach. Years of sloppy rule stacking layered like a house of cards. Then I called the one person who knew how to bring it all down. My brother, David. David had never served, but he wielded the law like a weapon. A former JAG prosecutor turned constitutional litigator. He was the quiet one at family guy who didn't say much until he dismantled you with logic. I sent him the footage, the charter, and a list of citations I'd received over the past 2 weeks. He called me back that night. "These people are out of their minds. I figured that out when they showed up armed. You've got at least 4 legal violations on their part. I can file a restraining order, start a civil harassment suit, and contact the state HOA regulatory board." "Do it. Are you sure you want this fight?" "I didn't start it, but I sure as hell intend to finish it." 2 days later, Barry was served with a court summons at a community meeting, a civil harassment suit, backed by evidence, drone footage, and legal precedent, citing trespassing, intimidation, abuse of power, and unlawful enforcement of extrajudicial codes. He was furious. He called me that evening, rage bubbling just below the surface. "You think you can threaten me with lawyers? I've run this community for 12 years. Then you should have learned the law by now," I said, "because you broke it on camera." "You're just a soldier playing civilian," he snapped. "You don't understand how this works." "I understand rules," I said, "but I also understand justice." I hung up before he could reply. The suit wasn't all. David and I submitted a petition to the county zoning board. demanding an independent audit of the HOA's finances and compliance practices. I backed it with statements from 6 neighbors who had also been harassed over minor violations: paint colors, fence heights, garden styles. I called a community meeting, public and filmed. People showed up at first, hesitant. Some feared retaliation, but I spoke from the heart about service, about sacrifice, about being targeted by a group drunk on petty authority. Neighbors began nodding, then sharing. An elderly woman recounted how Barry had fined her for displaying a Marine Corps flag on her porch. A young couple revealed that the HOA delayed their occupancy permit over a missing hedge. Barry watched from the sidewalk, seething, powerless to stop the tide. That night, the neighborhood Facebook group exploded. #RecallBarry trended locally. A petition to remove him from the board gained over 100 signatures in 24 hours. The next morning, I found a sign taped to my fence: Commander Grant for HOA President. I laughed. I didn't want power. I wanted freedom from people like Barry who confused title with authority. But I also knew the best way to dismantle the problem was from the inside. The courtroom was packed wall to wall: neighbors, veterans, reporters, even a couple of county officials. Barry sat across the aisle in a wrinkled suit, face tight, lips twitching every time someone whispered or chuckled behind him. His 2 enforcers, including the now infamous Mitch, were conspicuously absent. Mitch had vanished after receiving a summons for unlawful weapon possession. Word was, he skipped town entirely. The judge, a silver-haired woman with the poise of someone long immune to theatrics, called the room to order. My brother David stood and delivered a precise surgical argument. He didn't grandstand. He laid out facts like bricks, trespassing with intent, unlawful enforcement of HOA codes, abuse of power, illegal brandishing of a firearm, and targeted harassment of a decorated military veteran on his private property. He played the drone footage. The judge leaned forward. Barry leaned back. When Barry's lawyer, a smug man from a mid-tier firm, took the floor, he attempted to spin the incident as an unfortunate misunderstanding. He claimed the HOA patrol was unarmed, that the footage was inconclusive, and that Barry was simply enforcing community standards. Then Deputy Holt took the stand. He confirmed the presence of the weapon, rarefied the footage, admitted he'd been stunned by the HOA's arrogance. By the time he stepped down, Barry's lawyer looked ready to fold his entire case into a paper airplane and disappear with it. The ruling came fast. The judge issued a restraining order against Barry and his board, forbidding them from stepping within 500 feet of my property. She also ordered a temporary suspension of all HOA enforcement activities, pending a full audit by the county. But the real blow came when she turned to Barry. You wielded power you were never meant to have. You created an atmosphere of fear and intimidation under the guise of community service. You have not only violated the law, you have betrayed your neighbor's trust. This court recommends your immediate removal from the HOA board and refers your conduct to the district attorney for further review. Gasps echoed across the room. Barry stood up, red-faced and sweating, and shouted, "This man is a thug, a killer. He doesn't belong here." I rose slowly. "I belong here more than you ever did. I bled for this country. You bullied your neighbors. We're not the same." The silence that followed was total. Barry sat down and didn't speak again. In the weeks that followed, the dominoes fell fast. The audit revealed misuse of HOA funds, thousands funneled into private projects, including surveillance equipment and a community patrol vehicle. Barry had never disclosed. He was removed from office by a 96% vote. His enforcers resigned. New elections were held. I didn't run, but I did show up to vote alongside dozens of neighbors I'd never really known before all this began. One by one, they thanked me. Some quietly, some with a firm handshake. One old man with a Navy tattoo slipped me a coin embossed with USS Theodore Roosevelt and said, "You brought justice home, son." The new board passed a resolution restoring individual property rights at the perimeter lots, including mine. Citations were wiped clean. Fines were nullified. The bylaws were rewritten with transparency and community oversight. I replaced the shattered gate with a steel one, engraved with the simple phrase, "Home isn't given, it's earned." I went back to my projects, built that greenhouse, started teaching martial arts to a few local teens. Tag remained my shadow, always watching, always ready. Some mornings I'd see Barry drive by, his old patrol SUV now just another beat-up Ford with faded paint. He never made eye contact, never stopped. He was just a man now stripped of his fake crown, exposed for what he was. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge and the crickets began their nightly song, I stood on my porch and looked out over my land, the same land my father had walked, the same land I had fought to defend, first overseas, then right here. Peace had returned. Not because I'd demanded it, because I'd earned it.